Hi, I'm Walter. I'm the Dutch mentor, and welcome back to the Smart Performance podcast. S stands for self-care, M for mindful growth, A for adaptive problem solving, R for rhythmic operation, T for building a thriving community, and P for performance, of course. And I'm really happy to have Danny with me today. We're going to talk about fail fast, fail forward. Maybe I should slow down in my cadence of my speed so I don't fail. But I'm not afraid to fail because I learn from every single failure that I make. And that is the key to success, but too many people are not catching on to that. So it is important. Stick with us. We're going to have 15 minutes of focused conversation with actionable takeaway. So again, do something with it today. So otherwise you will forget about this by tomorrow morning. Danny, thank you very much for coming on the show today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks for having me, Walter. I am an acute care surgeon, professor of surgery for the past 17 years, still clinically active, and just published my book that is labeled Cut Open, A Surgeon's Stories of Loss, Resilience, and Growth. And I have been on this campaign to share what I think are the tenets of how to bounce back after bad things happen.
Yeah, I think it is. We've seen it as a clinical provider, as a medic and flight medic. I've seen plenty of people making mistakes along the way in critical situations, both in the clinical world and the business world, and they did not bounce back. One
Yeah.
mistake can lead to a detrimental outcome, and it's a real shame. And I think that we all are human at the end of the day, and to err is human. But having resilience is something that you really need to build up before the mistake even takes place. So frame the problem for me, something that you have experienced or something that you have seen, so people can relate to this.
So for me, a major, I take care of acute surgical emergencies. So some would say high risk, high reward, but when things don't go well, they can have pretty dramatic outcomes for patients. And uh, about 6 years into my career, had my worst complication that I've ever had. It's actually coming up on its 10-year anniversary in 2 weeks. And that was devastating for me. And even though I had trained 11 years after college to get the job that I that I was doing, nobody ever taught me the skills that was necessary to recover after something bad happens. Because the only surgeons that don't have complications are the ones that don't operate. So you're going to have failure, you're going to have setbacks. And we use this word resilience, which I like, but if you look at the definition, that is, if I was functioning here and then something bad happens, I'm now functioning here. We use the word resilience to say that you got back to that level of functioning. I would like to get people, and if you look at the statistics, very few people make it to this level of what is known as PTG, which is post-traumatic growth. Almost everybody knows what PTSD is, and that's when you don't bounce back to the level you were. But how do we get even better after we have a mistake? And I spent a lot of time digging into that subject.
Very interesting. I've seen it, certainly can relate to it, and having been exposed as a flight medic to some of the worst things you can see out in the pre-hospital world, and mistakes were made there too. It is the bounce back, starts with critical incident stress debriefing after an incident takes place. And what I've seen, too many people are bottling it up and they're keeping it to themselves, and that really can be detrimental. And that's where you get that stuck into that PTSD piece of it, rather than being able to learn from it, grow from it, and actually share sometimes the mistakes that have been made, so other people will not make the same mistake. So thank you for laying out that problem statement, and it's something obviously was impactful to you. So now show me, the path that you took and what it is that you laid out in your book itself. What actionable things can people do in order
Yeah.
to learn to do mitigate, right? Because it should be about how can we prevent things, how can we build that capacity, and then how can I respond to it in case something does happen.
So I'm going to answer it in two ways: the way the individual can do it, and then how you can help your companion. I'm going to start with the second one because it's actually easier. There is overwhelming evidence. I'll say that again. Overwhelming evidence that in order to help somebody else bounce back, that being getting support from somebody who is your peer, who does what you do, makes a difference. So what do I mean by that? I had this awful complication. I'm so sad. You know, my wife of 16 years at that time, now 25 years, not in healthcare. She knew that her husband was sad, but didn't understand the nuances of what mistake that I had made, what the anatomy looked like, the decision. It wasn't until my former chairman, one of my heroes, and I told him the story of what happened, and he shared with me a really difficult case that he had been through. That's actually when my healing began. And so, peer support, being there for somebody who does what you do, and you don't even have to be trained. You could just, one of my favorite, don't just say something, stand there. Just being there and saying, I got you, buddy, that actually does a world of healing for other people. So the kind of actionable take home message number one, if you're going to be like, be a supporter to your peers, that helps tremendously. The harder part, the individual. So I'm going to give you a couple things. One, we think that if we admit mistakes, drop our guard, show vulnerability, that you're actually going to lose trust in me. And that is, in my opinion, not a true statement. When I show my vulnerability to you and say, Walter, I made a mistake, I'm trying to learn from it, that actually builds trust. And 90 some percent of people, that if I drop my guard with you, you'll drop your guard reciprocally with me. And now we have a connection. And when we have that connection, we can build trust. And when that happens, I can start healing because now I have a connection with somebody. The other thing that I like to talk about, which is much harder, it takes years to develop, is I use the term learn to talk to yourself nicely. And what do I mean by that? Bad thing X happens and our brains go haywire. I use the term spiraling, and I'll give you the example what I mean by that. When I had my horrible complication, my brain went to, I'm a bad surgeon, therefore I'm a bad doctor. If I'm a bad doctor, I'm probably not that great of a husband. If I'm not that great of a husband, I'm probably not a very good dad. I'm probably not a very good friend. And it spirals out of control. And it's very difficult to stop that. You have to learn the skills of what I call learning to talk to yourself nicely. So I can say, all right, Danny, that did not go the way that I wanted it to. Okay. However, you have the skills and the tools to make a difference in a lot of people's lives. We're going to learn from that one. And then we're going to go on, we're going to go make a difference in the next person's life. Much harder to do. I think it takes years to develop. But that is what whenever somebody comes to me with difficulty, I ask them, can you control your thought process? Can you talk to yourself nicely?
I think it is such powerful words, and I can 100% relate to this. And I think that the words that you just chose, is that people tend to compare my story against your story. But really, what we need to do is convert, and we need to learn to relate to each other. It's where, and through that wording of relating to each other, is where the real power is. I'm a commercial helicopter pilot. I've done 1,000 or more landings and takeoffs. I've had one bad landing that caused me to take abrupt action and be able to, and had to fly away from it, and narrowly avoid a building, and lost control of the helicopter. But intuition, I was able to rescue it and put it back, keep it all safe. I beat myself up for the first 24 hours after that, like there's no tomorrow. And then finally, that light, no different. And what I do is, as a way of making sure that I don't burn out, I share my story, right? It is, I share it with other people. I also seek out some expertise and say, why did this happen? But it wasn't until exactly what you just said that I said to myself, you know what? I'm looking at it from a negative point of view that I screwed up. But really, what I did is show to myself that if I get into trouble, I was able to get myself out of it as well. So it shows you how far my training has gotten me to the point that I
Yeah.
didn't have to think about, because when that happens, you don't have time to think about cycling, collective, pedals. It all needs to happen all at the same time in order to be able to, and that is really the key. And it is words of gratitude and recognizing that and learning and finding, comfort in the fact that you're not the only person who's ever made a mistake in life, but grow from it. And I think because of that, today I'm a better pilot because of that incident than even before that.
No doubt. And I, going back to my former chairman who helped me, who told me a story of of a bad outcome that he had, and I said to him, and this guy's been the chair president of every single surgical society that I've ever, you know, I said, that happened to you? He goes, yeah, Danny, it happens to everybody.
Yeah, it
And
does.
that was the first time. I am not the first person to have a surgical complication in the world. And so that's where, again, going to that other part, that peer support makes a difference. The other thing that you said, one of my favorite quotes, and I do not know who to attribute it to, but you use the word compare, and we are terrible about this. I love comparison is the thief of joy.
It is. Yep.
And that's where I don't want to spend to it, but that's where, like, I think social media does more harm than good, because you're out there comparing yourself to things that aren't very realistic, and people putting out these versions of them, and then that starts that negative thought spiral that I was
Yeah, and
talking
people
about.
have to remember that the brain is, two-thirds negative, right? It loves to go into that spiral, loves to be to dwell on that. And in order for you to come out that, you should be able to talk to a peer or somebody that can relate, and you have to break the cycle consciously, right? It just does not happen on its
Correct.
own. You have to be very conscious about that. I think relate, don't compare comes out of Alcoholics Anonymous,
Oh,
background.
really?
Yeah, because people always say it's like, listen, I'm not the clochard. I'm not laying in the gutter with a brown paper bag drinking. Well, that's just one manifestation of alcoholism. Alcoholism can be very quiet. Can be the mom who's at home drinking 3 glasses of wine and having and for all the wrong reasons. That person also can be an alcoholic. So it's not about comparing how bad I'm off. It is learning to
Interesting.
relate to the symptoms and the outcomes of the choices that you make. And that is really the key thing that in life, right? It is that, and strangely enough, or not strangely enough, but men more than women, our pride and ego often get in the way of progress, right? It is that how many times have people make mistakes, and their pride and ego don't allow them to either to admit to it, so they're more likely to make the same mistake again. And again, for the people who are non-clinicians listening to this today, listen, this is no different in the business world, right? People
Right.
make mistakes all of the time, but don't bury them. Is right. Be vulnerable, be outright, and I 100% agree with you. The word trust is non-negotiable, and there's no better way of building trust by being open and being honest and being sharing. And there's no different than you and I are teaching in universities. Is that I tell my students about my mistakes because they need to know that we all are going to make them, and that's where we learn from them, right? It's really, really important. So what's the next step? What is your suggestion? What is, tell me a little bit about your book in a minute and a half.
On my book in a minute are, it's funny, the worst review that I ever got was this woman who said, "There's nothing new in this book." And I think that she was probably actually correct. They are my stories from the surgical world, which tend to captivate people's attention. And they're my stories of kind of lessons for life, if you will. Each chapter starts with a story from the surgical realm, and then ends with take home messages. These are the 2 or 3 things that I would like you to take away from this one. And it's supposed to be just a little primer that hopefully leads to some people's, professional or personal satisfaction. And that was my um, it was my way of healing, of trying to recovering after I had such a difficult outcome.
It is it's so funny that a woman who said that they don't learn, right? It is that behavioral change only takes place after repetition over an extended period of time, so you can create new normals. And when people say, there's nothing new in it, you should go back and read it 2 or 3 times and really absorb the information, because you probably need that information more than anybody else, right? So, then really interesting conversation today, and it is so very important, because the sad thing is that those people who are not finding it, because they're not growing past the problem as a human being, they do burn out, and people do make poor choices, including suicide. So anybody, again, it is in the healthcare field, we know, and I've lost my fair share of friends over the years because of these types of things, that people are not willing to openly talk about, either problems at work or at home. So again, the word here is that there's help out there. Find a peer, find a mentor, find somebody to talk to, and let go. You're not in it alone, right? That's really the key. Excellent, very good. Where can we find you?
So my website is integritysurgery.org, all one word. I do have a LinkedIn profile, one by a wonderful woman up in Michigan, for me, to relays all the messages to me. But if you go to that website, integritysurgery.org, there's a way to get a hold of me on there. And then the book's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and everywhere else you can find it.
Excellent. I'll make sure it's in the footnotes of the show. And I encourage people, right, that this through those types of story that you really can learn to relate. Don't compare, but learn to relate to it and take something out of it that when you're in time of your need, that you can fall back up on that. Danny, give me a closing thought or a comment.
Closing thought or comment is I've been a surgeon now for about 17 years, and, been fortunate to, save people's lives and have people say the nicest things to me. Here's the takeaway the thing that actually leads to professional satisfaction: feeling supported and feeling like you belong to a community. So be that person that supports others and builds your community.
I think that is very, very powerful, right? There's family, values, friends, and make sure you have a little fun along the way too.
That will happen. If you have built your community and you're supportive of each other, you'll have a blast.
Yeah, and be in the present, right? It is that get your head out of the telephone and internet and be present in the moment itself. Thank you very much for joining me in conversation. I found it very, very beneficial. And again, to the audience, if you want to do something and learn and grow, do something with this information today. Think, actually, this is a conversation you probably should listen to a couple of times. There's some really golden nuggets here for things that you can move forward on. Maybe even jot them down so you can fall back upon it when you are in your time of need. You can always go to dutchmentor.com, book a call with me. And again, there's plenty of resources out there for you. The thing is, you have to remember, you do not need to go at this alone, just like Brene Brown always tells us. Danny, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Walter, for having me.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.